Greetings and welcome. How are we all feeling today? With how overwhelming life can get, how chaotic things can get, we become overstimulated when we are overwhelmed. Overstimulation means that there is so much going on in your environment and that it's igniting all your senses all at the same time. Then it becomes a bit much for the brain to process, because the brain internalizes and processes less information than you actually take in. The brain internalizes less information than you actually perceive. So it's easy to get overstimulated when there is too much for the brain to process. Too much emotion, too much noise, too much busyness, too many things going on, too much stress. And overstimulation happens a lot in public spaces, and is often also very prominent in people with social anxiety. People with social anxiety can become very overstimulated in social situations or public spaces, and then they become overwhelmed, and those emotions just sort of make you feel like the walls are closing on you smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's what overstimulation is. And it's important to recognize it when it does happen, because anyone can get overstimulated, but people who are more prone to anxiety tend to get overstimulated a little bit more easily. Or if you have been overstimulated for a prolonged time, your sensitivity to more overstimulation is very high, very prominent. And we get overstimulated when we are very stressed, when we have a lot on our minds, when we feel we cannot deal with what's happening in the now, what's happening right now. Then we get very overstimulated, and overstimulation can lead to catastrophizing. And catastrophizing is a result of being overwhelmed as well. Catastrophizing is taking something that's pretty bad and making it worse and worse and worse by thinking about it in a worse way, thereby causing volatile and very negative emotions. And that then reinforces that every time you engage in that thought and allow that emotional response. Overstimulation can be an emotional response as well. If there's a lot going on for you emotionally, you're struggling in your relationships, you're struggling at work, you're struggling with your self-esteem, then you can become emotionally overstimulated. If there's a lot of fighting, a lot of conflict, a lot of issues, then you can become emotionally overstimulated, which is a bit worse, or can be worse, than sensory overstimulation. Because with sensory overstimulation, you can remove yourself from the situation into a quiet space where you can calm down. With emotional overstimulation, you cannot separate yourself from that emotion in a healthy way. If you separate yourself from an emotion caused by overstimulation, then you are just going to build it up and build it up and build it up until you keep getting overstimulated, until you keep getting overwhelmed, and then everything just becomes a disaster. Because if you don't deal with overstimulation and you're not able to practice mindfulness, be in the moment, calm down, take things bit for bit, because when we become overstimulated, we tend to pack a lot more things onto what we're already experiencing and feeling. We tend to make it worse, because if it feels bad, I'm going to feel even worse about it. And when you engage in an emotion from that overstimulation, you're reinforcing the panic, you're reinforcing the non-resilience, because dealing with overstimulation is knowing when it's time for you to remove yourself from a very busy situation, or to spend spend some time by yourself when you are very emotionally stimulated. Possibly go for a walk, because a walk is very good for mental and personal reflection and can help you sort of work off and walk off all of those emotions. Usually with overstimulation, a physical outlet and a distraction to do another task, maybe more creatively or actively, helps with overstimulation. Yes, it's about dealing with it, but in that moment when you are beyond stressed and you are beyond overstimulated, you need to distract yourself so that you can relax. And once you are relaxed, you can deal with what has been causing you to feel overly stressed, overwhelmed, overstimulated, and overall just overworked and burnt out. And the dangerous thing about overstimulation is that it can cause panic attacks and breakdowns. People become so overwhelmed with these high energy emotions, these high energy feelings, that overstimulation can cause the brain to go into shock. If you make it worse and you keep becoming overstimulated, it causes the brain to go into shock, and it causes you could have breakdowns. You don't necessarily always have breakdowns because of overstimulation, but people who struggle with anxiety tend to struggle with panic attacks and breakdowns because of overstimulation. And this is because the brain is struggling to process what you're experiencing in the moment, like your stimuli, your stimulation, and the stress that you're feeling all at once. So the brain doesn't know what to do with all of this information and all of these feelings about what's going on in your environment and in your experience. And that is what leads to panic attacks, and that is what leads to breakdowns, when it all just becomes too much and we just break down completely. And overstimulation is also about becoming overstressed. When you're very stressed about a lot of things happening in your life, then it's easy to become overstimulated by those things as well. And it also makes you more sensitive to stimuli. So if you are very overstimulated, loud music, loud noises are going to affect you in a bad way, and it could also cause panic attacks and breakdowns. So it's when you become very sensitive to the things that are going on in your environment. And overstimulation is when we are exposed to many things that ignite our senses. If there's a lot of noise going on, there's a lot of bright colors, there's a lot of smells, you hear a lot of things, and it's all just at once, like at a carnival or something, you can get overstimulated because there's just too many things that are igniting your senses. There's just too much information for the brain to process all at once. As I said, the brain doesn't process as much information as you perceive. And then high intensity stimulation leads to panic and emotional distress. You become very emotionally distressed when you are overstimulated, and there's no place for you to quiet yourself or quiet down, and you become very overwhelmed and you start panicking and you're in a place where you don't feel safe. That's when you become emotionally distressed from overstimulation. And overstimulation can create a lot of issues in the psyche. It can make you very vulnerable to breakdowns and being triggered by certain stimuli. And it's important that when you are experiencing overstimulation and it is getting to a very overwhelming and breaking point, that you find a quiet, dark place and you remove yourself. And it doesn't just have to be from environmental overstimulation, emotional overstimulation as well. It's important that you put yourself in a room that's quiet and dark, not a lot of things going on, and you start processing what you're feeling. You start noticing what you're feeling. And you just take the time for your brain to just sort of level out and reboot, even if you have to go have a lie down. So remember, you are unique and valuable. Take care of that beautiful person. Stay strong wherever you're from. You are worthy.